Hi, Paul Johnson for Film Obsessive. Today I'm with Angeline Gragasin. She is the director and writer and editor, I might add, of the short film Myself When I Am Real. It's been on the festival circuit. Welcome to Film Obsessive, Angeline.
Thank you, Paul, for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about your film, but you've been very busy, it sounds like, on the festival circuit. Where has the film been and what kind of reception have you garnered?
Yeah, we've had an amazing festival run so far. Just got back from CAMFest, Center for Asian American Media Festival in San Francisco, preparing to play at the Palm Springs International Short Film Festival next month. And some of my favorite festivals, I've noticed the film has been programmed alongside hybrid films. We played at the New Next Film Festival last fall. This was actually my favorite. We played alongside a my film is a longer short, and they programmed us beside a shorter feature by a filmmaking duo called Cassidy and Shatsky. And they had a hybrid doc film, like a documentary film that had some fictional elements. And my film, as you know, is a fictional film that has documentary elements, or you could call it an auto-fictional film. And so it was really amazing to be in dialogue with just one film to allow the audience to focus more on my film in relation to this other film, and also to emphasize the hybrid nature and like the craft of my film. I really appreciated. Women Make Waves International Film Festival in Taipei also programmed me in this way, and I find, yeah, I think that's like a really exciting way to present the work in terms of its formal qualities. Um, Rather than, I mean, I must admit, I feel like pigeonholing it as a coming of age film or like an Asian film or a Filipino film has been somewhat frustrating for me because the hope is that it's so much more than that. But I've had a great time so far, and the shorts block we're playing in Palm Springs is called Life of the Party. They haven't announced the lineup yet, but I imagine the film will be played alongside other short films having to do with parties, which I find very intriguing, and I'm excited to see that program.
That sounds fascinating. And you say you might not wish for the film to be pigeonholed as, say, a coming of age film or an Asian film, etc. It is those things, and it is far more than those things. You also described it as an autofiction, which is an interesting term. Can I have you, for our audience, just in the most efficient way you can, describe what the film is and does?
Yes. Well, autofiction, I mean, that term has only recently found its way, I think, into the like cinematic discourse, and it comes from, I think, literary criticism. An autobiographical work with fictional elements, or is somewhat fictionalized. So in, many ways, my film is based on my own lived experience, therefore is autobiographical to some extent, but also very, very heavily fictionalized. But the film is about a mother and daughter who attend a Christmas party in suburban Wisconsin. It's a Filipino Christmas party specifically. And it's shot on mini DV in the style of a home movie. So the idea is we're kind of getting this like slice of life glimpse into this dysfunctional Filipino Christmas party, shifting perspective between the mother and child. And well, I'll leave talking about the mini DV for later. I'm sure you're going to ask more about that. That's in a nutshell what the film is about.
It's really charming and it's really funny. I had a couple really good laughs at it, and it's also a very insightful treatment of the relationship between mother and daughter as they're in a new place. I feel like it's set in suburban Wisconsin. Is
Yes.
that where you're from?
Yes, I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, which
Mhm.
is just south of Milwaukee. It's almost on the border of Wisconsin and Illinois on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, okay. And can I ask to what extent the film is or is not autobiographical?
That's a very good question. To what extent? Um, well, I am Filipino American. I mean, American born to
Hmm.
a Filipino immigrant mother, single mother, as are the characters in the film.
Hmm.
Um, and I grew up going to parties like the one depicted in the film. Um, Now, the occupation of the mother is, that's kind of where the similarities end. Um, and like details, I think that were written into the film for character development, just for the purposes of storytelling, there are some embellishments there. But I guess the quality of the relationship and the environment that you're seeing, that is very much rooted in my own lived experience and true to life, I would say.
Okay. Especially the party, I take it. The entire film is set in one single party over the course of what, perhaps a few hours?
Yes, so you get to see, a little bit during the day and then sunsets and you see, it continues on into the night. And it's a period piece. It takes place in the year 2000.
Hmm.
So all very, very accurate.
And did that setting have something to do with why you went to the mini DV home media style of shooting?
Yes. So when I had written this, I wasn't sure what camera I wanted to shoot it on.
Hmm.
I didn't quite have the visual style fully developed. Until at some point I thought, I think I'd like for this to look and feel like a home movie, like an authentic archival home movie that was unearthed, a tape that you found that hadn't been played since 2000. Um, and I brought this to my DP, Eugen Yohe, and he said, "Oh, that's a great idea, but the year 2000, people weren't shooting on VHS anymore. People were shooting on mini DV. Would you consider that?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Of course." And then he said, "Well, but rather than shooting on a consumer level camera, for maximum authenticity, because we know this is a fictional film that's going to have a theatrical release, um, we wanted to increase the production value. He proposed shooting on the same camera that Thomas Vinterberg shot Festin on. And that camera is the Canon XL2.
Hmm.
So shot on mini DV, because as to Eugen's suggestion, which I really, really loved. Um, and we did not, the one thing we did not do that Thomas Vinterberg does is transpose that to 35 millimeter
Okay.
film. It's just the raw tape, what you're seeing purely out of the camera with no visual effects, no color correction. So all of those glitches and artifacts are happened organically in camera. But I see that as a happy accident and it gives like texture and grain and adds to the film's kind of archival quality and the authenticity of feeling like, okay, this is a real home movie tape, with all of its imperfections. So I was actually,
It absolutely does. Sorry, and I wanted to ask, is it like a one camera shoot then?
yes,
Wow. Okay. And also I mentioned early on that you are the writer and the director and the editor, and I want to ask a little bit about balancing those three roles, but let me focus right now just on editing that footage, because you're doing a lot of work here, to do things that a director not shooting in this style would not do. Like you would not have the camera person be like present in the diegesis of the film and told to get out of the way. And I'm just going to ask you to talk a little bit about how mindful you are of this visual design when you are both shooting and editing the project.
that's a really great question, and I'm so glad you asked about it. Yes, I was very intentional with choreographing. Well, it wasn't totally choreographed. There's a lot of improvisation and spontaneity from the performers, but Eugen and I made a decision, my DP and I, that, okay, the perspective of the camera person, they are a character in the film, in the diegesis of the film, as you say. We decided not to name this person because it wasn't relevant to the story, who is behind the camera. We wanted it to just look and feel like they were another guest at the party, which is what allowed you to have that level of access and intimacy,
Mhm.
to seeing things, private moments, that uh, a professional camera person might not have access to, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we did a lot of rehearsals with the actors where we're trying to not only capture the action for storytelling so that you can understand, you know, what a character's motivations are or see their reaction at a certain moment, etc. But we also did a lot of work to mimic the the quality of amateur videography or of a home movie uh, camera person. Meaning, at some point, I realized after we rehearsed enough times, Eugen starts to anticipate the action because he knows because it's scripted.
Mhm.
And a lot of my direction on set was don't anticipate, you don't know what's going to happen next. So there needs to be a delay. Um, when you're moving the camera, if action happens over here, over there, you can't follow the action. There always needs to be a delayed reaction. And it just needs to feel more spontaneous and organic. So a lot of the choreography Eugen and I were doing were one, following the action for storytelling purposes, and then two, inhabiting the perspective of the camera person as a character, discovering moments for the first time and following it as like a documentary cinematographer would, without knowing in advance. I'm kind of repeating myself, but does that make sense?
It does absolutely, and I just wanted to compliment you and he both because it leads to some really marvelous moments in the film with some action, taking place really outside what the quote normal perspective of the party would be. We look for instance at a conversation on a couch between two people who are dancing, do a little bit of eavesdropping there. We go under the table for one important detail. And then at the end, there's kind of a climactic moment that happens off screen doing just exactly what you described. The camera has to follow and catch up with a sound that's important. All of that works really cool. Was Vinterberg like a model for you, or were there other films or filmmakers or I don't know, even series or episodes that you kind of look to in thinking this through?
hmm well, the Vinterberg was Eugen's reference. I had actually never seen the film before he brought it up. And I think he brought it up because it's also about like a party that goes wrong, and that takes place all in one location. And so we watched that as a reference, for this film. But zooming out in general, I'm very much attracted to films that feel like documentary and documentaries that feel like fiction. So films that just blur the line between fiction and nonfiction. I would say my greatest influence and biggest inspiration is Agnes Varda,
Ah,
for sure. And she made her whole career of
mhm.
moving between fiction and nonfiction. Before we had this thing called hybrid
Right.
uh, film, she was already experimenting with that. And I find, the poetry in her cinema and her kind of unapologetic. I mean, she was one of the first filmmakers to adopt mini DV, also like Les Glaneurs et les Glaneuses, also I think year 2000. Um, so she's a huge inspiration to me, and I was fortunate enough to be able to interview her in 2017, which
You
was a
were. Wow.
very meaningful and like life-changing, transformative experience. And her approach to perspective and the conflict between reality and artifice, private and public, all of that has influenced me as a storyteller. I'm very drawn to films that are about public and private self-image or our relationship to our own image. those are themes that are present in her work. And also structurally, how she tells a story is she's very rigorous in the screenwriting. Um, that's a huge influence to me as well. But I mean, I can talk at length about lots and lots of filmmakers. I don't know how into how much detail you want me to go, but I'll just pause.
That's exciting. And it is the Varda interview something that might be published that we would be able to have access to, or I could include a link to. If so, I'd like very much to include that here and take a look at it myself. And so it's an interesting journey. You were a, suburban Wisconsin kid, some 25 years ago, now making your way as an accomplished filmmaker through the festival circuit. What's your journey been like?
Hmm. Well, I fell into filmmaking by accident. I loved movies growing up, but it never occurred to me that I myself could make movies, could become a filmmaker. I didn't know anyone who was a filmmaker. And, I'm a millennial. I came of age during the digital revolution.
Mhm.
So as a child, I mean, yeah, we were still shooting on mini DV and, you know, films with theatrical release were still all shot on 35. And it just seemed like this far away, foreign, alien world, impenetrable and very exclusive and inaccessible to someone like me. Um, but I had a really amazing education in Wisconsin. I went to a really small school, um, K through 12 school. So I went there through age 7 to 17, and it had a huge influence on me because it had a really incredible fine and performing arts program. And I was exposed to a lot of different media and a lot of different international artists and traditions, not only in the visual arts, but in music and theater. Um, so, yeah, I studied a lot of different ways of making as a child. And then I ended up going to the University of Chicago for my undergraduate degree, where I majored in interdisciplinary studies in the humanities.
And
Which
was that with an eye towards filmmaking, or was that an
no,
art form that you came at still later?
it was still much later. So
Mhm.
at Chicago, my concentration was theater and performance studies, and I focused on like avant-garde Polish theater making, like experimental theater. I was studying Grotowski, I was studying Tadeusz Kantor, and then I was also studying clown and commedia dell'arte, and like studying training with theater artists who had trained at Jacques Lecoq. I don't know if any of this means anything to you, but I trained as a theater artist, so that was really my focus as a performer, but also as a writer and a director. And it's a very interdisciplinary craft. So that's the foundation, I would say, for my practice as a filmmaker. And then I just kind of randomly fell into it. I was cast in an indie feature by an emerging filmmaker in Chicago, and I had so much fun. But I thought, oh, I really want to be on the other side of the camera. That seems much more interesting to me. And my favorite part about filmmaking is collaboration. Just it's essential. It's necessary. You must collaborate to make a film. Um, and so that's what drew me to filmmaking. And just by collaborating with other young filmmakers, other kids who had themselves gone to film school and knew had had training, I learned by doing. And then many years later, once I realized, okay, I would like to make this my career and this is my passion, I went and studied and got an MFA in screenwriting, which I felt like was the only aspect of filmmaking that I really wasn't able to master or focus on in the field. Like I couldn't really self-teach. I wanted formal instruction. So I do have an MFA in screenwriting, and screenwriting is my favorite part of the filmmaking process.
You mentioned that filmmaking is your passion, but it's very clearly also your talent as well. It's very evident in myself when I am real. Enjoyed the film so much, and I just wanted to conclude a little bit here today by asking what is the future that you foresee for it?
Myself When I Am Real was originally written as a feature film. So there is a feature version of this, of the same name.
Mhm.
I initially wrote this in grad school, the first draft of the feature. And then the pandemic hit and things slowed down. As I was developing the feature, I had the idea to, as many filmmakers do, develop a short, kind of to use as a proof of concept or a work sample for the feature film. So that still exists. I learned a lot in the process of making the short that now I can apply, go back to the feature and apply to when I revise that project, which is still in development. I have many other projects in development as well. My next film is actually set in Paris, so I'm working with a French producer right now. I kind of press pause on myself when I'm real to focus on seeing the short through festivals and developing this other project in France. But I'd love to return to the feature and I would love to, of course, direct it and produce it and see it into the world. I guess it's a matter of timing and finding like values aligned collaborators, which, yeah, is very much out of my control.
I understand and know well the challenge. And I just want to thank you for bringing us these 18 minutes of myself when I am real. Hope other members of our viewing and reading audience get an opportunity to see it as it continues its festival run. And who knows, maybe in the future, a little ways down your path, we'll get the opportunity to see that other version of it realized as well. Thank you, Angeline, for joining us at Film Obsessive today.
Thank you so much, Paul.
And good luck to you and it as it continues its festival run.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.